Okay, let's unpack something truly fundamental today. Have you ever looked at the world around you and just felt, I don't know, that there's maybe a deeper layer, something the usual explanations don't quite capture?
Yeah.
Maybe it's, the mystery of consciousness itself, or some of the bizarre rules you hear about from quantum physics, or even just that sense of deep connection you sometimes feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Those feelings, they really point to the heart of a fascinating conversation that's happening right now.
Mm.
It's captured beautifully in the book, The Universe, Life, and Everything, Dialogues on Our Changing Understanding of Reality by Sarah Durston and Ton Bagerman.
Exactly. And this isn't just like one person's grand theory.
Right.
It's a collection of dialogues, real deep dives with leading thinkers. We're talking physics, psychology, economics, all exploring this core idea that the way we've understood reality for centuries, well, it might be starting to shift.
Right. So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to explore those core arguments that are bubbling up from these dialogues. Why is our current view feeling insufficient? And what might this new, maybe expanding understanding actually look like?
So let's start right there with the view we've mostly operated under. The book runs pretty well, pointing out that our dominant understanding is, what, roughly 350 years old?
Yeah, about that. Tracing back to Descartes, Newton.
Right. And look, it's been incredibly powerful. I mean, it fueled the scientific revolution, all our technology. It shaped the modern world.
Oh, absolutely, no question. This paradigm, it sees reality as built from separate material pieces, little billiard balls kind of interacting through clear cause and effect.
Atomistic, materialistic.
Exactly, often separating mind from matter dualism. One of the thinkers in the book, Alex Wendt, he puts it quite starkly. He says this view treats humans almost like non-living machines. His phrase is, classical man is dead, under this perspective.
Wow, okay. And for a long time, that map seemed to work, right? But now, the book suggests, that map is showing some pretty significant tears, some cracks in the foundation.
Yeah, and perhaps the most persistent crack, the one that just keeps showing up again and again, is consciousness.
Hmm.
Why do we have subjective experience? Why does it feel like something to be us? That philosophical question. Science can study the brain, map the neurons firing, but that subjective inner light, it's still elusive.
We can't quite pin it down.
Exactly. Attempts to just locate consciousness purely in the brain, they haven't really fully succeeded. And that's leading some serious thinkers, people in the book, to reconsider ideas like panpsychism.
Which is the idea that awareness isn't just in brains.
Right, that maybe some form of awareness or mind is actually a fundamental property woven into the fabric of reality itself, not just something that pops up when brains get complicated enough.
Okay, so consciousness is one big crack. And then what's fascinating is how modern physics throws another huge challenge at this old view. And maybe
Yeah.
maybe it even offers some clues for a new one. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Quantum mechanics.
Huh?
It describes a world that behaves completely differently from our everyday experience. Solid, separate objects, not so much at that level.
It really turns things on their head.
It does. Concepts like the observer effect, they're not just philosophical ideas. They show that the very act of measurement of, gaining knowledge about a quantum system fundamentally changes that system.
So looking changes things.
In a way, yeah. At the subatomic level, reality isn't fixed little things just sitting there. It seems to exist more as possibility or a tendency towards being. It only collapses into something definite, something real in the way we normally think of it when it's observed or measured.
Okay, possibility becoming actual. And then there's entanglement.
Ah, yes. Einstein's spooky action at a distance.
Right. Particles linked instantaneously, no matter how far apart. No classical cause and effect connection we can see. It suggests this deep, non-local interconnectedness.
It's profound. So profound, in fact, that one surprising detail the book points out is that the math from quantum probability, it actually predicts human decision-making better in certain cognitive puzzles, like the Linda problem they mention, than classical probability theory does.
Really? That's wild.
It is. It sort of hints at maybe a deeper structure that's common to both quantum reality and how our minds work, perhaps.
Okay, so physics is pointing towards this deep interconnectedness. And kind of ironically, our biggest global challenges, climate change, humanitarian crises, they seem to stem from us ignoring that very interconnectedness, right? That's the third big crack the book talks about.
Exactly. Our atomistic view, seeing everything as separate parts, has led us to treat nature, and maybe even each other, as just disconnected resources or problems to be managed.
Instead of a whole system.
Precisely. Herman Weifels, in the book, makes a strong case that these crises demand a really fundamental shift. We need to move from dominating nature to stewardship, from thinking in rigid linear ways to more fluid, circular, networked thinking. I mean, think about the
It's
internet.
a good example.
It functions as this complex, self-organizing, interconnected system, a very different model from, say, traditional top-down hierarchies.
Okay, so the old map separation, fixed parts, it's not really working for consciousness, for fundamental physics, or for our global systems.
Yeah.
So if that map isn't working, what might this new territory look like, according to these dialogues?
Well, the conversations in the book seem to point towards a view of reality not as static things, but more as an ongoing process, a process of possibilities unfolding.
Like waves, not particles.
Something like that. David Bohm's ideas come up with this image of reality emerging from an underlying quantum sea or foam, maybe, constantly being created and recreated from pure possibility.
And if reality is this fluid process, what's our role? The observer's role, you said earlier, looking changes things.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the idea that observation isn't just passive. It's not just recording what's already there. Henry Stapp, for instance, he describes this two-step process. A conscious observer asks a question, right? And that act plays an act role in selecting and actualizing one possibility out of many into concrete reality.
So we participate in making reality concrete.
That's the provocative idea. Even in cosmology, the concept of horizons, what you can observe, depends on where you are, suggests that what counts as real isn't absolute. It can depend on the observer's perspective.
But wait, if reality is this sea of fleeting possibilities constantly being actualized, why does everything seem so stable, so predictable day to day?
Good question. The book introduces the Zeno effect as a really key concept here.
The Zeno effect.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon from quantum mechanics.
Yep.
Basically, continuous observation or measurement can effectively freeze a quantum system.
Yeah.
It prevents it from changing state.
Like the watched pot never boils.
Kind of. And the book draws these powerful analogies. Think about social institutions, like marriage, for example. Through continuous acts, beliefs, reaffirmations like repeated measurements, this abstract concept is kept stable and real in society. It acts like a Zeno effect.
Huh. So our continuous attention, our belief stabilizes things.
And that connects to another idea, reification, treating an abstract concept as if it were a concrete thing. The book suggests reification, maybe powered by belief and the Zeno effect of continuous attention, can actually give concepts, maybe even meaning itself, a kind of mass or stability in reality. It's not just in our heads.
Okay, that's a lot to chew on, this interconnected process view. It also offers a new way to look at things like synchronicity, right? Those meaningful coincidences.
Exactly. If quantum entanglement points to these non-causal connections at a fundamental level, maybe synchronicity is just our everyday experience of that deeper, interconnected reality, where meaning isn't something we just assign after the fact, but it's somehow part of the underlying structure. Herman and Herma share some really moving examples in the book that feel deeply connected in that way.
And Ton Baggerman, one of the authors, he proposes something interesting here too, that our emotions, our thoughts, they actually contain possibilities.
Yeah, and when our mental possibilities interact with the possibilities in material reality, they can create new outcomes. It suggests mind and matter aren't totally separate substances. Maybe they're different forms of the same underlying stuff, possibility itself.
So meaning isn't just imposed, it's part of this unfolding.
That seems to be the idea. Meaning is tied into this process of possibilities unfolding, perhaps becoming more complex.
Which raises a big question. Does this unfolding process have a direction? Is it just random or...
The dialogues definitely explore that, the idea of a formative tendency in nature, a kind of bias, not just towards randomness and entropy, but towards forming greater complexity and meaning. Ton sees meaning itself as this accumulation of possibilities, the very process of becoming more complex. It reminds me of that Rilke quote.
I live my life in ever-widening circles.
That's the one. A beautiful metaphor for this expanding awareness and potential.
Which brings us back to our own consciousness,
Yeah.
our sense of being a single, separate self. Maybe that's a necessary illusion, created by the brain filtering reality, using that Zeno effect of continuous experience to give us a stable platform.
It could be a stable platform to interact with the world. But perhaps, just like those quantum particles are interconnected, maybe we are part of some greater universal consciousness. That ties into panpsychism again, and maybe Jung's idea of the collective unconscious.
So the challenge shifts. It's not just about individual growth, but recognizing our part in the collective in the world.
Right, recognizing our contribution, our connection.
Of course, talking about all this stuff is, well, it's hard, isn't it? The book even mentions the paradox of language. How do we use old words for potentially new realities?
Exactly. You risk losing meaning or just creating confusion.
Mm.
And there's resistance, too, naturally.
Oh, yeah. Intellectual skepticism, for sure, but also just, sociological inertia. People's careers are built on the old model.
And the easy temptation to just label it all New Age woo and dismiss it.
Right. But the contributors, they seem optimistic. They seem to feel the shift is happening, even if it's gradual.
Yeah, perhaps like a tipping point. Not one big revolution, but more like water turning to ice.
Hmm.
Or they use an example of a cloudy lake suddenly clearing. Individual parts kind of recharge, and collectively that shifts the whole system's perception.
So if we were to summarize the core message from this deep dive into the book, it's that our understanding of reality seems to be evolving, really fundamentally.
Yeah, we're moving maybe from a mechanical separate parts view
Yeah.
towards one that's deeply interconnected, process-oriented.
And where consciousness, possibility, meaning, they aren't just accidents. They might be fundamental aspects of the universe, maybe even linked to quantum physics.
That seems to be the thrust of it.
So why does this matter to you listening right now? Well, this isn't just abstract science or philosophy, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It directly impacts how you see yourself, your connection to others, your place in the world and nature.
It could change how we approach, well, everything. Personal growth, well-being, but also tackling those huge global challenges, climate change, inequality.
Absolutely. Which leads to a pretty big final thought, doesn't it? If reality is this unfolding process of possibility, and if our awareness, our intentions, maybe our collective beliefs, if they can play an active role in shaping which possibilities become real, what responsibility do we have?
Yeah. What responsibility do we have in consciously engaging with that process, shaping its direction, both in our own lives and maybe collectively in the world?
That's definitely a question worth carrying with you.